My name is John Passfield, and the title of this reading will be John and Mother Goose, Video 12, Little Boy Blue. So here is my novella, John and Mother Goose, Carnival of Tales, with John and Mother Goose standing, surrounded by mythical characters in the center of that ring. While driving his granddaughter home from daycare, John suddenly finds himself standing in the midway of a carnival of Mother Goose fairy tales. He's greeted by Jack, of Jack and Jill fame, who tells John that Mother Goose is expecting him, as she has a role for him to play. But what does Mother Goose want? And why does she think of John as a writer of detective stories? And why, when she meets John, does she greet him as almost a long-lost son? And for that matter, why do so many of the fairy tale characters have different stories that they want John to write for them, instead of the ones in which they've lived for hundreds of years? John is not a mythical creature. He's only a human after all. But can he save the Mother Goose Carnival? Can he solve the mystery of the vanishing fairy tales? Well, in chapter 5 of the story, John continues strolling the midway of the Mother Goose Carnival tales with Mother Goose and watching the stories that are being presented on the stages. After each presentation is complete, Mother Goose introduces John to the main character of that presentation. Then John and the main character sit in a character tent and talk. So in this chapter, chapter 5, John and Mother Goose watch the nursery rhyme of Little Boy Blue. Little boy blue, come blow your horn. The sheep's in the meadow, the cow's in the corn. So let's start with the performance. We'll go to page 29. And have a look at how this particular nursery rhyme is performed on stage. Excuse me again. The faded sign says, Little Boy Blue, come blow your horn. Okay, leaving some material out. Two stage hands come out on stage. One shakes out a green rug, which looks like grass, and places it on one side of the stage. The other stagehand carries a frame of fence rails which holds corn stalks and places the frame on the other side of the stage. Okay, and then moving a few pages further on, we pick up on this. A stagehand comes out on stage leading a sheep with a rope and a weight. The stagehand places the weight down on the carpet of grass, and the sheep looks out at the audience. A second stagehand comes out leading a cow with a rope and a weight. He places the weight next to the stand of corn. The cow and the sheep stand on the stage and look at the audience. Little Boy Blue comes out on stage. He acknowledges the smattering of applause with a slight smile. He moistens his lips, and then he raises his horn and adjusts his pucker and begins to blow on the horn. Now, at the end of the performance, Little Boy Blue is taking his bow to a smattering of applause as two stagehands come out to clear the stage. Mother Goose tells me that she will introduce me to Little Boy Blue. So, that was nice to meet a celebrity. So here we go back to page 29 with John and Little Boy Blue in the character tent, the tent where all the characters congregate after their performances are over. And Little Boy Blue launches into a story that he would rather act in, other than the one he has found himself acting in for at least 100 years. I'll be born on the wrong side of town, John, in this story, so my tale will be pretty basic, brutal and blunt when you write it for me. Little Boy Blue puts his horn on the table and settles down to tell me his yarn. There's a word you might not want to use, John. Don't know how nasty you get in your books. You might want to call it politely a house of ill repute to protect your reader's ears, John. But it's a whorehouse in the lingo I'm using with you. I'm just a little boy, and one day a customer can't pay. There's a rumor that he's my father, but I wouldn't know. The thing that started the rumor, John, is my mother's favorite song. You are my sunshine. Night after night he's been trying to learn it, but it's just no go. So anyway, he has this sheepish look because he tells the girls he's broke, but he says he'll leave his battered horn behind. There's a slight twitch when he's nervous beside his left eye. He says he's never been a great horn player. Maybe the kid could give it a try. He says there's a battered fiddle in the pawn shop. Maybe he'll have some better luck if he saws the strings. He puts the old horn in my hands, John. There's that twitch in the eye again. And I press my face against the screen door and watch him go. So that's scene one of the story that Little Boy Blue would rather act in. Okay, let's have a look at scene two of his story, his preferred story. Well, that horn makes me a prodigy, John. I pick it up and it comes alive. I become the youngest horn player to make the scene. Every joint from New York to Chicago, every dive from there to L.A. Diamond rings on all my fingers. They catch the lights as I rear back and play. Smoking rooms and late nights and wads of dough. And no matter what goes down, John, bar fights, police raids, broken pool cues on the floor, I end the gig with my mother's favorite song, You Are My Sunshine. But the whole scene begins to turn sour, John. Dark forces lurk in the woodwork. Shades of a whorehouse lure over me. Fiends snatch at me from hell and drag me down. Drug addiction. Do you know what that entails, John? Is taking a needle and spritzing poison into your veins. Self-medication, John. An attempt to deaden the pain. I'm going nowhere. Zip. Downhill. Only a coffin could bring the agony to heal. There's an auto accident occurs. I cut up my face and mangle my lip, John. See me crawling away from the wreck as she loudly explodes? Here I am in a hospital bed, John. See my arm bound up like a mummy? There's a cable up to the ceiling and down again. The doctor is telling me that I'll never again play the horn. I'm feeling low, John. A friend brings some bourbon. I take a swig in my hospital bed. Delirium tremens, John. Palm trees, blue skies, a bourbon-filled oasis. I dog paddle, John, lapping feverishly around a lagoon. If the bottle was bigger, I'd dive inside and drown. Well, that's part two of the story that he would rather act in than the story he's been acting in, which is Little Boy Blue. Okay, let's look at part three as Little Boy Blue speaks to John in the character tent after his performance. But there's still another scene, John. I overcome all the odds. I have a comeback that nobody in the music business can believe. Here I am standing on stage, John, the Hollywood Bowl or Carnegie Hall, one of those cavernous, prestigious music venues. See me standing there all alone in the spotlight's glow? I moisten my lip, the battered lip, the one that got mangled when the car went smash. And then I raise the horn to my lips and try to blow. Well, it's never worked in rehearsal. I don't think I can do it, John. But they push me out on stage just the same. At least give it a try, says my manager, and gives me a shove. You'll hate yourself if you don't try it, says my mother. She's retired from the whorehouse by now. And there's other friends as well. All the hobos and the bums that I met when I was lying in those alleys with 2 or 3 needles sticking out of my arms. They're sitting with bated breath in the very first row. Well, I'm standing there on stage, John. I know I can't play the horn. But then a miracle starts to happen. I see it walking across the stage. You guessed it. My father turns up out of nowhere just for this scene. His eyes twitching as he tells me that I am his son. I feel new life in my lip, John. He twitches and whispers again. He says he will marry my mother and make her legit, but only if I play her favorite song, You Are My Sunshine. Then he goes and sits beside her and they hold hands. I have what I call a transformation, a transcendence, a seismic shift, an epiphany. transposed, transcribed, arranged for harp or horn. My eye is twitching madly, John, a butterfly dancing on red-hot coals. I lift the horn to my lips, and then I blow. Well, you won't believe this, John. There won't be a dry eye among your readers. Their tears will blur the pages of your book. The purest notes your readers have ever heard, John. Their eyes will look up to the ceiling. They won't believe these notes are coming from a human horn. Sure, there's no music in a novel, John, but I'm sure you can do it with words. You got to make your readers believe they're hearing these notes. In my mind, I see thousands of readers humming along. Little Boy Blue has told me a story. All the tents have been battened down. The nursery rhyme characters sit and chat. It's a long way from the sheep in the meadow, the cows in the corn. And there could be a sequel, John. It's a saga, I'm sure you'll agree. Remember my father and the old battered fiddle? We'll get together and play duets, form a father and son duo, and go out on the road. We'll work up an act for a Vegas performance. I replace Gabriel on the Day of Judgment. He develops a cyst on his throat. And my father spells off Nero on the day that Rome burns. One of those big extravaganzas that Vegas does so well. The special effects, John, you can describe as out of this world. The two of us go on tours all over the world, John. Stadiums bursting and airports crazy with eager fans. We appear with symphony orchestras and teach them my mother's song, You Are My Sunshine. Father and son together like brothers, together like pals. We do commercials for horns and fiddles. It starts a worldwide musical craze. The money comes rolling in like a tsunami, a mile-high tide. We'll be the biggest stars of our time, John. Bigger than kings, bigger than popes. We could spin this out forever. Ever franchise any of your books? For the finale, we'll get a father-son TV show. One of those religious TV talk shows, John. My mother could tell her a story as well, as father and son play her song with a 1,000-voice choir in white robes. You are my sunshine. As the roof of the cathedral set opens, and angels, wings flapping, are lowered down on wires, every angel complete with a basket for gathering tithes. Well, that's the third section or chapter of a story which Little Boy Blue would rather act in than the nursery rhyme into which he's been born or created. I suppose when one thinks of literature, when one thinks of all the great books that one has read over a lifetime of enjoyable reading, one could ask the question, who knows the story better? 2 dashes here. Number 1, the reader who's read the books once or twice, or number 2, the main character who has lived inside that story for hundreds, perhaps in the case of our oldest folk tales, for thousands of years. Well, here we have Little Boy Blue, who sits with John in the character tent and tells John that he no longer wishes to live and act in the story that the world knows as his nursery rhyme. He claims that he feels destined for other things, better things, bigger things. So if we say to ourselves that the great stories of the human experience, that the great characters of the human experience represent the various forces that are at work in human lives, then we can ask ourselves who would know better, Little Boy Blue or John? Whether Little Boy Blue is forgetting what he represents in the human experience when he asks John to write a different story in which to live and act. Is he assuming, perhaps, that he will carry that force with him from the earlier story, the one in which he has acted for hundreds, perhaps thousands of years, to the new story in which he would rather act instead? John, as a human writer, gets to decide whether Little Boy Blue will change stories, but is John, as a human, qualified to decide? Myth is a very powerful force in human affairs. Just who is qualified to create the myths by which humans shape their own and others' lives? Perhaps the use and misuse of the power of myth by humans over the millennia is one of the subtle, barely noticed topics with which literature, all serious literature, occupies itself. Perhaps all serious literature concerns itself with the battle of the myths. Now, this is my novella, John and Mother Goose, The Carnival of Tales. It's found on Amazon, where there's more information. You can find it on my publisher's website, roxmillspress.com, where there is more information. And at my website, there are 2 free books. Just click on the cover icon and they will be there on the screen for you to read. The planning notebook for this novella, and the journal, the reflective journal. One shows the progress I made as I worked my way through the planning and writing, and the other shows my reflections as I was polishing the completed novella, taking in all of the topics that a writer thinks of when writing a book of this nature. Lastly, I'll just say thank you for watching this video.